Smooth space and striated space, the space in which the war machine develops and the space instituted by the state apparatus, are not of the same nature. Oh, didn't see you there. Today, we're going to talk about orchestral music. Hello everyone, welcome to Flicker Theory Reviews. I'm your host, Tadas Vinokur. Today, we reach the final plateau, the last remaining chapter of 1,000 Plateaus. I hope that this set of reviews will make this earth-shattering work of theory a little bit more accessible. That is to say, perhaps these reviews will inspire some of my viewers to generate new arrangements of Deleuze and Guattari's concepts. After all, this book, like this set of reviews, is a patchwork quilt of ideas which we rearrange and reinvent every single time we go back to it. Also, if you like this video, please consider subscribing. Anyway, today's chapter is called The Smooth and the Striated. Here, Deleuze and Guattari focus on space, or the way in which social and political life is organized spatially. The smooth and the striated are the two ways of interpreting territories. That is, territories can be smooth, flexible, malleable, or striated, rigid or fixed. Actually, I talked about the smooth and space and the striated space already in the nomadology and geology of morals plateaus, so do make sure to check that out. Here we can also recall the distinction between the state and the war machine, which I discussed in nomadology and capture plateau reviews. The state functions in a striated space, while the war machine operates in a smooth space. Here I can give you an example. The state seeks to manage a population by dividing, striating, sectioning the space into units. Every activity within the state apparatus has to possess a purpose, a reason, and identity. Considering this, the smooth space is that which escapes the striated space. A smooth space is created by the activities that are imperceptible or molecular, activities that cannot be included within the hierarchical organization of the state apparatus. Right at the beginning, Deleuze and Guattari make it clear that the theoretical distinction of the smooth space and the striated space does not do justice to the real de facto operation of these two forms of space. That is to say, these forms of space can coexist as a mix. They emerge as passages from one space to another. Deleuze and Guattari actually are in this chapter more interested in the interaction between these two kinds of space. How does the smooth space become striated and vice versa? For this reason, they present us with 6 models or 6 examples that are supposed to show us the various aspects of the two forms of space, the smooth and the striated, as well as the very complex relations between them. Number 1 is the technological model. Here they make a distinction between fabric and felt. For Deleuze and Guattari, fabric is striated, whereas felt is smooth. Well, what does that mean exactly? Fabric is woven, which means that it is striated. It belongs to the striated space. Deleuze and Guattari write, a fabric is constituted by two kinds of parallel elements. In the simplest case, there are vertical and horizontal elements, and the two intertwine, intersect perpendicularly. Deleuze and Guattari consider this to be an example of homogeneous organization, in that fabric is organized around one rule, a specific pattern that administers a whole piece of fabric. Felt, on the other hand, is a supple, solid product that proceeds altogether differently as an anti-fabric. It implies no separation of threads, no intertwining, only an entanglement of fibers obtained by fooling. This means that felt symbolizes the smooth space. Felt can be freely expanded. It does not possess an organizing pattern that would limit its extension. Deleuze and Guattari give us an example of embroidery, which possesses a central motive of design, and patchwork, which is created piece by piece as successive new additions are put in place. Patchwork, as Deleuze and Guattari describe, is an amorphous collection of juxtaposed pieces that can be joined together in an infinite number of ways. For this reason, felt and patchwork represent the smooth space wherein a heterogeneous and amorphous space is created. Model number 2 is called the musical model. Here, Deleuze and Guattari mentioned French composer Pierre Boulez, who thought that one occupies smooth time-space without counting, whereas in a striated space, one counts in order to occupy. We could say that smooth space is identified with rhythm, while the striated space is identified with harmony. As Deleuze and Guattari claim, whereas the striated space is made of fixed and variable elements, the smooth space is continuous variation, continuous development of form. It is the fusion of harmony and melody in favor of the production of properly rhythmic values, the pure act of the drawing of a diagonal across the vertical and the horizontal. Model number 3 is the maritime model. Here they start by reiterating something that we already knew, namely that there are indeed lines and surfaces in the smooth space. But these lines are never subordinated to fixed locations or points, as they are in the striated space. For Deleuze and Guattari, the sea, therefore, is the perfect example of the smooth space. As they claim, the sea is the smooth space par excellence. However, the sea is also striated, or at least throughout the history, people really try to striate the sea while navigating the open water. First, they used crude maps in order to find their way in the sea. Then they developed more sophisticated ways of navigation, such as the use of a coordinate system. This is precisely the way in which cities were controlling smooth spaces, such as sea, air, desert, or space. In all these cases, cities undertake to create tools of navigation. They want to establish an order of striation. Model number 4 is the mathematical model. Here, Deleuze and Guattari begin by discussing Bernhard Riemann and his work in mathematics. As I discussed in the Nomadology Plateau review, Deleuze and Guattari view Riemann's vision of space as representative of the smooth space. Well, so for example, we all know what is Euclidean geometry. It is a type of geometry we learn in school. Here we learn that the two parallel lines can never cross each other, that the angles of triangles add up to 180 degrees, and that the shortest distance between 2 points is always going to be a straight line. In Riemann's vision of geometry, the flat surface onto which we draw triangles, squares, and parallel lines is disposed of. We now have a world that is no longer flat. We have a surface that is curved, angled, and crooked in some way. This should come off as a very natural thing to us. Even the Earth's surface is not flat, it's spherical. This means that in Riemann's geometry, the shortest distance between 2 points is not necessarily a straight line. The shortest distance will depend on the unique curvature of the surface where these points are located. A space that is flexible will always curve in different ways, which means that clear-cut dialectics in calculation cannot be applied here. What we require here is an estimation in mathematics of multiplicities that have tendencies towards stasis and change. As Deleuze and Guattari write, the ordinal, directional, nomadic articulated number, the numbering number, pertains to smooth space, just as the already numbered number pertains to the striated space. Most importantly, we always have to keep the distinction between royal, striated, and nomadic smooth signs in mind. As I discussed in the Nomadology Plateau, they are related. Nomadic science takes cues from the royal science and vice versa. Model 5 is the physical model. Here, Deleuze and Guattari want to stress the difference between heterogeneous smooth space and homogeneous striated space. Here we can again think about the Riemannian geometry. Deleuze and Guattari write, Riemannian space is a continuous variation that exceeds any distribution of constants and variables. The freeing of a line that does not pass between 2 points. The formation of a plane that does not proceed by parallel and perpendicular lines. That is precisely the heterogeneous form of space, smooth space, which possesses a multiplicity of flows that constantly pass through it. Here we should also discuss Deleuze and Guattari's distinction between work in striated space and free action in smooth space. During Enlightenment and the evolution of modern science, work has been defined as something that happens in striated space. In the political economy, this would mean that work is a clearly defined procedure that brings about a result, a product, or a profit, if you will. I carry a box from one place to another, I engage in work. On the other hand, free action in this case would be a procedure that happens in a smooth space. For example, within a stateless community that lacks strict political and economic organization. In a word, my actions are free actions before they are captured, striated as labor power by state capitalist institution. Finally, contemporary global capitalism, which is often based on immaterial labor, is particularly interesting here because it uses both the smooth space and the striated space. As Deleuze and Guattari write, the multinational companies fabricate a kind of deterritorialized smooth space in which points of occupation as well as poles of exchange become quite independent of the classical path to striation. That is to say, contemporary capitalism constantly produces surplus value, which circulates in the smooth space. Work does no longer produce simply a material product. It produces new forms of information, new forms of services. It constantly bolsters value. Finally, model number 5 is the aesthetic model. Here Deleuze and Guattari discuss 3 distinctions: close range and long distance vision, haptic and optical space, and finally abstract and concrete line. As to the close range and long distance vision, Deleuze and Guattari write, it seems to us that the smooth space is both the object of a close vision par excellence and the element of a haptic space. The striated, on the contrary, relates to a more distant vision and a more optical space, although the eye in turn is not the only organ to have this capacity. This means that within the smooth space, an artist can perceive that which is immediate within close range. The artist shows a series of localities that are in some way connected to form a patchwork. Within the striated space, then, the artistic perspective organizes, it striates the space. Aesthetics of the striated space, therefore, always privileges the point of perspective. This point organizes the whole of the mise en scène. This should be quite familiar to us. When we go to the museum, we often see paintings that depict a perfect model of nature, or say a human body. Such an aesthetic presupposes a rigid organization. It solidifies and guarantees clearly defined striated space. To summarize, the smooth space in aesthetics is local. Your location, your environment is the only point of reference. You're presented with a heterogeneous space relative to your immediate environment, the direction towards you are going, and your speed of travel. The striated space in aesthetics is global because any object is relative to the organizing perspective. This way, all objects can be compared and put into a homogeneous form of hierarchy or pecking order. Finally, the smooth and the striated space function in relation to each other. Striated space may expel the smooth space, while striated space must always have its origins in the smooth space. We therefore should be skeptical towards the way in which state apparatuses, for example, organize our lives. We should be able to use smooth space for our benefit, as it may allow us to be more creative. However, we shouldn't romanticize the smooth space, as it may lead to suicidal and fascistic collapse. In other words, use the smooth space with caution. Thank you so much. See you next time.